What are unethical practices schools do? I'm a middle school teacher. Anyone in special ed is to be integrated, and it's almost always for the better. Keyword being almost always. We have a skin room that is a bit out of the way, but not in the basement or by the boiler room. It used to be in the middle, but we had to move it for several reasons. Normal students would wait outside and jump on the sped kids, or they would rush in and try to set them off as much as they could before the paras removed them. A few years ago, we had students who genuinely should not have been integrated, because they were a danger to other students. After one student who was the victim of severe cruelty, and frankly, should not have even been here simply because there was no way we could provide the help he really needed, was routinely caught whipping out his thing to girls and boys he liked and other things, well, they got moved. He was a victim of cruelty, and he always said, "Isn't that what you're supposed to do to people you like?" There was also one kid who, when I was still learning, and thus not a teacher, we nicknamed the Monster. He was given way too many chances, and we found out later he was put into a psychiatric hospital because he nearly ended his older sister in her sleep, and the only reason he didn't was because his parents tackled him to the ground. I still never forget the time the Monster so casually talked about his little brother passing away from SIDS and why he didn't understand why it was so sad because it's just a baby, or how casually he'd talk about all the violent things he'd do to some students if they crossed him. I don't think that younger brother passed away from SIDS. Story 2. Here's a few. Number 1. Not letting kids go to the toilet when they need to. I distinctly remember one kid in my German class bursting into tears because he couldn't hold it in any longer. He asked at least 3 times. Number 2. Closing every single bathroom because of one fight in the bathroom. We have 28 bathrooms in our school, all of them closed. 3. Our assembly room or gymnasium had the first escape doors chained shut, and the police department was aware of it. Number 4. Less severe but limiting kids' access to water, i.e. you can't have your drink bottle at the table, which sucks when you live in Australia and in summer the temperature gets up to 36 degrees Celsius and school's during all the hottest hours of the day. Number 5, bullied students are told to leave because it's easier to kick out a quiet victim than a loud bully. Number 6, only having one bathroom open in high school. There are thousands of kids. 7, giving preference to kids that parents donate money and fraternize with teachers or headmasters. Number 8, lowering a school's funding if the SAT scores are low. If the scores are low, there should be more funding to help kids learn. Number 9, in the case of there being a fire, I think it's stupid we have to go in alphabetical order. So Adam is happy and healthy, but Zach just turned into ash. In my opinion, they should all just get in line no matter what. Number 10, firing lunchroom staff for serving food to poor students whose families can afford to pay. It's just so ridiculous to not let a student go to the restroom. Story 3. This is at a university level. Say you're a grad student who just secured an opportunity to travel internationally with university funding for your research. You put in a travel request with a suggested travel and lodging budget that gets approved within your funding. You, the grad student, still have to front the money no matter how much it is. And reimbursement can take 3 weeks to 3 months depending on how much pressure the finance officer is under, who operates on a first-in, first-out basis. So you secured this wonderful grant for thousands of dollars, making no or little money as a grad student. Maybe you're even a fully funded student paying no tuition. You still may be too poor to actually conduct the research you were brought there to do. Story 4. So for about a year, I worked for a federal student loan servicer. People would call in and I'd try to help them find a way to manage their student loans. I don't want to really unravel the student loan thing, but there are financial aid offices out there that are straight up lying to their potential students. If I had one person tell me that they were told they wouldn't have to pay back their loans if they graduated, I'd chalk it up to that person being an idiot. When I had 10 people tell me they were told that, I think there's someone misinforming them. All these students attended Bible colleges in Tennessee and Arkansas. Story 5. If a bully starts a fight with you and you do nothing to defend yourself, you get suspended for fighting. If you run from a bully to avoid a fight, you still risk being suspended for fighting. This is why I beat the poop out of a bully when I was in 8th grade. I figured that if I was going to be suspended for the actions of someone whom I could not control, I may as well earn it myself. Same thing happened to my friend. He had to stay after school until 6 p.m. for his dad to pick him up. He was commuting an hour and a half from his job in the city, because the administrators didn't want another fight to break out during bus dismissal. When his dad finally showed up and asked his principal why he was being suspended for defending himself, he was told he should have either, number 1, run to get a teacher or staff, or number 2, crawl into the fetal position until the bully stopped hitting him. His dad got so pissed at her and said, "Well, I'm sorry I didn't raise my son to be a wuss." They got in the car to drive home. He really thought he was going to be in so much trouble with him, but he was proud of him and happy that he was okay and stood up for himself. He was just so angry about the response from the principal and the fact that he had to be held at school while the other guy got to take the bus home. They took different school buses as they lived in opposite towns. Excuse me? Crawl into the fetal position? What the hell? Story 6. I had a student who never showed up and never did work in my class. The principal asked me to change his F to a 75. I emailed back, explained that the student never made an effort, etc. He told me to be a part of the team and do as I was told. I was only a second-year teacher and was afraid of losing my job, so I obliged. Same principal a couple of years later. We had a very large student, and she walked down the bus ramp one day. Some boys called out the bus window the filthy things they wanted to do to her while also calling her fat. I wrote them up and chewed them out. When the principal read the referral, he simply said, "Boys will be boys," and tore up the referral. To this day, I wish I would have asked him what he would have done if that was done to one of his daughters, but I was so shocked. It still boils my blood. Also, making school start at 7 a.m. and the bus route comes by your house before 6:30 a.m., so you have to get up around 5:30 to 6 a.m. every morning. Then say you have an extracurricular activity that takes at least 2 hours, but if it's a sports game, it's probably closer to at least 4 hours. Then let's say you have a test tomorrow as well as some homework, so you study or work for at least 2 hours. At this point, you have spent well over half your day doing school-related activities. If you want to get a full 8 hours sleep, which is unlikely, that leaves you with about around 2 hours of free time per day, which a good chunk of it is probably spent eating a meal, showering, getting ready for the next day, etc. And then people are surprised when teenagers are always tired, depressed, anxious, etc. Schools are crazy. Story 7. Having worked in a private school for 16 years, I have so many answers for this, but I'll limit them to the following. Stating in the shiny brochure given to the parents that any possession or use of illegal substances means instant expulsion, and then allowing students caught with them to return after a 2-week suspension. The only kid at my former workplace who was expelled over it happened because they stole the money they used to buy them, telling students that if they defend themselves from local bullies, they'd be suspended. This rule was dropped after a student ended up being pushed into a river after having their nose broken. Letting students sleep in dorms where the walls were riddled with damp because there was no money in the budget for repairs, while finding the funds to do a full refurb on the toilets in the school auditorium right before the visit of a member of the royal family. Treating male and female students differently. Case in point, a female student caught performing an act on a male student was moved to a new school, while the boy was allowed to remain where he was. Story 8. Most, if not all that was said, are unethical practices schools do that affect kids, but there are plenty of unethical practices that affect teachers as well. As with all things, it depends where in the world you live, of course. My wife's an elementary school teacher. A few things that come to mind. They get paid 35 hours a week, but that's the hours they are at school. However, they have nowhere near enough free time to prepare their classes and exams, grade homework and exams, etc. that has to be done at home, unpaid. A lot, and I mean a lot, of required material comes out of their pockets. They have an ever so tiny budget every year for material that isn't even close to being enough. Everything else has to be purchased with their own money. Even at school, if they print or copy more than X pages, nowhere near enough, they have to pay for the extra pages. This is more of a pandemic-specific thing, but in Quebec, due to the explosions of cases, they decided to have Zoom classes until the 17th of January. In the same announcement, the government made it very clear that anyone who can work from home should do so. Next day, my wife gets a message from her school telling her she'll have to do her Zoom classes from the school. Go figure. More specific to my wife's school, though I have no doubts if it happens in many other schools as well, the more senior teachers have a lot of influence on how the students are split in the different classes, which often results in them taking all the easy students and leaving the more junior teachers with the difficult ones, rather than try and split them more evenly. For educators to get funding for classroom supplies and projects because some comes out from their own pockets, if you agree that it's maddening that this needs to be a thing, then don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Story 9. How they treat students with learning disorders. I've been bullied and stressed by teachers all my life because I just had ADD. In elementary school, my teachers would be physically and verbally cruel to me, hating my guts all because I worked slowly without bothering to help. Eventually, for those students that do get help, get sent to the concrete storage rooms with teachers who can't be bothered to give any help with their students. The most help they give is showing 6-minute inspirational videos which only reinforce the feeling of being different. All this puts more stress of school on my shoulders of constantly hating myself because I'm slow at work and being battered by teachers that the only reason why I don't work is because I'm lazy. It got to the point where in my sophomore year of high school, I nearly passed by 3 heart attacks because I got so sick from the stress. I've only had one teacher bother to help me. He would let me stay after to do work in his classroom, even helping me, not being the best as he was a math teacher, but he also got me out of my comfort zone by getting me into clubs and going out to things like the FFA with him. I haven't talked to him since that year ended, and I feel horrible for it, as I at least should owe him a thank you. Story 10. Punishment rules in general have screwed me and my friends over numerous times. The process of getting bad students or teachers reprimanded is convoluted at best and useless at worst. When me and my friends were being bullied, like hardcore bullied, my year group and the year below, we tried to report the main 4 to safeguarding. Bear in mind, the incident that pushed us over the edge was watched by a PE teacher. They had a meeting which only made it worse. Turns out all they did was have a stern talking with him. We said safeguarding it got worse and they couldn't do anything else. It was against the rules. Left us with no choice but to skip a lot of our classes out of literal fear. We got in trouble for it, obviously. I don't know what type of rules they have in place. I mean, these students have no choice but to skip lessons for fear of their sanity, but we can't punish these students. Is their mindset that they're stupid? I want to add this second story. My friend was verbally abused by her English teacher for 2 years because she was misandrist. And this is no joke either. People have purposely failed English to be moved down a set. Her class was for A+ and A students, so they had to get C and D grades to be moved down, to not deal with her, or dropped English literature altogether when lower classes got too full. Male students did noticeably statistically worse in her classes, and in the entire history of her being one of the 2 English literature teachers, A males had taken it at A level and 7 dropped it after 1 year. My friend was the exception. He was determined to do well, i.e. not fail because she refused to not fail him. He was getting A grades in the other teacher's class. He reported her 3 times in those 2 years, and it only led to more literal torture. Every lesson he would get lectured or shouted at for saying an argument not approved by her, being nice towards the male characters, or basically just speaking. It took admin me, a female, getting in trouble for standing up to him for them to think that maybe they should change something. They didn't, but we inspired the year below ours to hate her and make her life miserable. There's someone now making their essays based on seeing The Handmaid's Tale, her favorite book, commentary on business and businessmen instead of men are saying just to piss her off. So nothing changed, but my friend got a C in English in the end. Story 11. I used to do IT for K-12, and some of the crap I've seen and reported. The first one that comes to mind, this was a severely small district. I want to say there were about 300 to 400 students max. One student had severe mental illness and no one working there was equipped to care for or teach a child with those disabilities. He was extremely violent. They built a room inside of a classroom that they could lock him into that had padded walls and stuffed animals and stuff inside. So he'd throw himself around the room screaming and kicking but wouldn't actually physically harm himself or others. I cannot believe that was legal. Had another kid with autism. He was in standard class. He would sleep pretty much all day in class. I once overheard a teacher's aide asking him a question and the teacher said, "Don't waste time on him. He's a lost cause." This school district also practiced corporal punishment. I once witnessed the middle school principal threaten a student who was being disrespectful. The girl laughed and said, "You think threatening to hit me scares me? I get worse at home." Story 12. Burned out former Texas elementary school teacher here. I left because of a student I'll call Daniela. Daniela's parents were illiterate, not judgment, just fact. Immigrants from Central America who wanted the education for their children that they never got. But because they were illiterate and working 12 to 14 hours every day, they couldn't help Daniela learn her own language, let alone read and write in English. So Daniela struggled in school her entire career and was unable to read or comprehend in any language, and the school system was designed to tear her down, not meet her where she was at and lift her up. So by the time she came to me in 5th grade, she wouldn't look at me, wouldn't lift up her head, she looked beaten, terrified of yet another year of failure no matter how hard she tried. Another year of a school system telling her that all her work and all her effort just wasn't good enough. She wasn't good enough. By the time we had worked together for about 3 months, Daniela would finally look at me and even crack small jokes in her limited English. We celebrated each small success she made and each step that showed some growth. She was making so much progress and beginning to feel less hopeless. Until state standardized testing time. You see, the test was deliberately written in language 2 years above grade level expectations for a native English speaker. All us teachers knew it. Not a goddamn thing we could do about it. So we had to give this biased, useless test to our bilingual students who struggled with English 2 grade levels below, and expect them to succeed in this test. And of course, our administrators, our school culture, and our parents all told our kids what a big deal this test was and it's important to your future, and it shows what you know, and if you don't pass, we'll retain you. What a great freaking message, right? I had to give Daniela the test or lose my job. Can't cheat for her, teachers have been arrested and charged for that. So I watched this kid who had worked so hard all year, test for 5 freaking hours. How many adults do we ask to do that? And I watched her fail, and I had to tell her her score. And no matter what I told her about how it didn't really matter, and I knew how hard she worked and how much growth she had shown, she knew. She failed again, just like always. I have many more stories like that, but she will always stick with me. Screw the school system. Story 13. Only going to talk about higher education. I attended a large state college in a sprawling state system. 100% failure courses. Professors who treat 100-level courses as a churn the fodder situations and their screw-ups are your problem. TAs selling the exams to students. Yep, that psychotic exam you wondered how Wonder Bro passed? They bought the answers. Paying for a course with a professor and only meeting or seeing the TA. TA shows up baked or drunk to a course or can't speak English. Wildly unqualified professors. Had a student bring a CPA brother into one of my accounting courses. The dude stopped short of attacking the professor and spent the latter half of our course previewing and correcting the professor every other sentence. Another example, I taught a Windows or technology course because the professor graduated in computer science before Windows existed. He sat there decaying in the corner while I taught the course, then let me preview the departmental exam to ensure our review covered everything. Catastrophic departmental exams and/or professor-made exams. Ever take an exam to see a few examples and wonder where the hell those examples were from? Previous editions of the textbook. The departmental exams aren't updated by edition and often rely on specific examples from the previous editions. I also spent a ton of time in the math lab because I had a math professor trying to make rocket scientists out of business majors. I kept organizing our entire class to go to the math lab and take up all their resources to the point they brought her in and told her to tone it down. She then came up with 2 different exams, A and B. A exam was basic algebra. B exam was given to each person at the meeting with a chair of the math department. I seriously am not a math major, and this was over a decade ago, but I didn't know you could put a matrix into an algebraic expression that contained 40+ polynomials. Our exams got tossed and we were given a P for passing the course. Non-state curriculum, different track courses that lead to the same diploma you'd get, but it's from a private institution. It's basically the opposite of 100% fail courses, where the math is gutted out of courses and they're reduced to vocabulary. I tutored students for stat in private in state colleges. You know, to get your stat credit to graduate, wink wink. The state course was skull-splittingly difficult. Private curriculum, I didn't know why they needed a tutor because it was literally just vocab. It was also a thing to tutor an exam for a few private school-attending students. I literally had the exam and just had to teach the student to show her work for the few examples that were on the exam. Failing an entire physics course because our professor got married to some rich or royal guy in Europe and went off to have a European wedding. Was a few weeks before a final and she hadn't made available her homework or prior tests digitally. Even if you made 100 in the final, the highest grade you could get was a 20 in the course. I suspect the only reason I accidentally graduated college was because each course I took was like sticking an anchor in their course system and dragging up all the crap and dirt it was based off of. If there was a cheaper textbook, I let students know. If the syllabus had the "lol, did you read me?" here are free points. I let everyone know. I'd normally take every question the professor provided, organized study groups, and accidentally organized a walkout along with accidentally having 3 meetings with different chairs for different departments. Almost all my courses prior to my senior year were P for pass due to some BS on their end. When I see how much people pay for higher education today, I'm like, holy hell, buy the answers to your exams and just live a stress-free life. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What's the dumbest thing you were punished for in school? Story 2 is wild. See you in that video.